Welcome back, Hononegah, and I'll be honest with you, it's kind of bittersweet. This will be our last lesson of the school year. So again, you can jump up and down and applaud. This is the end of chapter 11. We do have a review day getting ready for our test on chapter 11, but this is the actual last lesson that we are going to do. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started here. 11.5. We're going to talk about different ways to display data, and you do have another worksheet. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of these displays I won't use. For instance, a pictograph. A pictograph, basically, you're going to show things using pictures. So like number of birds in that particular picture. A bar graph. Bar graphs used a lot when you want to basically have different specific categories. For instance, if you're going to show how many of a particular animal there are. So many birds, and so many dogs, and so many cats, and so many horses. So again, showing a particular individual category. Circle graph is used a lot when you're kind of breaking something up into a whole. So a certain percentage of people do this and a certain percentage of people do that and so on. So if you're going to have a whole situation and you're breaking it up into categories, circle graph is a good, very, very good one. Line graph, anytime you're doing something over time. So parts of a whole, I'm going to circle the ones that are kind of important. Circle graph, if you're doing something that's parts of a whole. Line graph, if you're doing something over time. Histogram, anytime you're going to, and we did histograms one day, shows frequency. So again, you're coming up with the same interval each time and how many fall in a particular interval. So histogram is a good one. Stem and leaf plot order numerical data and shows how many are being distributed. So how many ones and how many twos, how many are, like a 10 and a 12 and a 13 and a 16. So again, breaking them down into the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. I don't use stem and leaf plot very often. Box and whisker, we had a whole section on box and whisker. Anytime you want to break things into quartiles, and so a 5-number summary of a data set. So that one would be one that you might use every once in a while. Dot plot I'm not going to use that one very often. Shows the number of times each value occurs. And then a scatter plot. Scatter plot a lot of times is used when you have data. So you're trying to find a correlation between two data or ordered pairs. So that's used sometimes when you're talking about the coordinate plane. So how can you display the data that best helps you make decisions? So here we go. Qualitative versus quantitative. Qualitative, okay, it consists of non-numerical entities. I'm going to stress that. Qual with an L, okay, is non-numerical. Basically, it's just data. It's not numbers, but data. Quantitative data is numbers. So when you're talking about something that has numbers or counts or measurements, if numbers make sense, then that is considered quantitative data. If numbers do not make sense, then qualitative data. So the prices used cars at a car dealership. If you were to find the average of that, it would make sense. So this is considered quantitative data. The jersey numbers, even though these are numbers, finding the average of the jersey numbers does not make sense. So this would be considered qualitative data. Okay, so if the mean does not make sense, you consider that categorical data or qualitative data. Lengths of songs played at a concert. The average length of a song would make sense. So I'm going to consider that quantitative data. The zodiac signs of students in the class is definitely qualitative data. Tell whether the data is qualitative or quantitative and explain your reason. So the reason is always going to be finding the average makes sense or finding the average does not make sense. So the telephone numbers in a directory, finding the average does not make sense. So that is considered qualitative data. Ages of patients at a hospital, finding the average age of people at a hospital does make sense. And so that is quantitative data. Lengths of videos on a website. Again, finding the average length of a video at a website makes sense. So that's quantitative data. Types of flowers at a florist, definitely qualitative, because finding the average does not make sense. So again, I don't really need to put the explain your reason. Either finding the average makes sense, and that's quantitative data with an N. Finding the average does not make sense, and that's qualitative data with an L. Analyze the data and then create a display that best represents the data. Explain your reasoning. Brown, blue, hazel, green, gray, and amber. Those are categories. 63, 37, 25, 10, 3, and 2. That's the number of students. If you're going to break something down into categories, a bar graph is probably the best way to describe it. So I'm going to make myself a bar graph. And at the bottom, I'm going to label each of the colors. So I have brown, blue, hazel, green, I'm going to run out of space here, gray, and amber. Now, I'm going to have to probably go by tens to get this to fit. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 going across, or going up, I mean. And I'm going to label that. And I'm going to create a bar graph. Now, bar graphs are not connected. So the number of brown, okay, and I was off just a little bit there. Number of blue. So notice these are not connected like it would be in a histogram. Hazel, 25. Green is at 10. And then we got 3 and 2. So I would consider a bar graph to be the best display on this particular one. Now, you could have other reasons. Okay, if you said these are all the people and you want to break it down into percentages, so the percentage of brown, the percentage of blue, the hazel, you could actually make this probably into a circle graph. But I think bar graph is probably the best way to go on this particular question. Analyze the data and then create a display that best represents the data. Explain your reasons. So these are speeds. We got interstate A speeds and we have interstate B speeds. And there's a lot of data here, so I don't know if I'm going to actually go through this, but this would probably be a good one for a histogram. I could break this up into intervals and then do a histogram. Another one, you could probably, what other displays could we do? Let's go back and look at all our different displays again. So it's not over time, so I wouldn't use a line graph. Probably wouldn't do a circle graph. Box and whisker plot, maybe, because you want to show maybe the data into quartiles, and you're really not going to do it as a scatter plot. So again, I'm going to skip this one as far as doing it is concerned, but I would probably like to do this one as a histogram. And again, there's so many numbers here, I'm not going to break this down into intervals and actually do it. Describe how each graph is misleading, then explain how someone might misinterpret the graph. So I'm looking at this, and they really didn't. You got 2007 and 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11. So you got your intervals here. They didn't make it into kind of a histogram. But notice that the increments going up start off at 1550. So it's starting off at such a high number and then going by 500s after that. So it's a bit misleading to look at this. It only looks like it's going up very small amounts, but each one of these is going by 500. So it doesn't look like much, but this is a pretty big increase in tuition from one year to the next. So again, changing the scale, making things smaller, makes this very misleading. And the next one, their increments on the side do not go the same each time. 8.96, 982, and then the next one only goes up by 0.01. 0.02, 0.03, 0.04. So down here they were going by 0.02, and up here they're going by 0.01. So changing that makes for a very steep, like there looks like there's a huge hourly wage increase when in reality it is not that big a deal. Okay, it's only going up by 4 cents, but because they changed the numbers on the side, it definitely is misleading as it goes along. So homework assignment tonight is a worksheet. This is the last homework assignment of the year. Good luck. If you have any questions, make sure you talk to your teacher.